We're now on to Chapter 5 of the textbook, Risk Assessment. We're going to cover and wrap up the system risk analysis, the analysis of risk as it pertains to individual systems, as well as delve a little bit into organizational strategic risk analysis, which is the security risks that apply to the organization overall. System risk analysis. In the last class, a matrix was defined that had the following elements: threats, vulnerabilities, likelihood, impact, and existing controls. The idea being as you follow this through and it gives you some idea of the net risk involved in a particular threat and vulnerability. We structured and organized the data to support the standard risk model. Now we need to interpret the data and make it relevant to the organization. This is about how to calculate the final risk score and how to present different views of the data to better understand specific risks. Risk classification. How do you organize the risk scored by relative severity? Well, one way is to replace the numeric scores, which generally are arbitrary. You might have a score of 4 or 5, but there's no real units to it. It's just 5 is worse than 4, for example. Replace them with high, medium, and low. And I might hasten to add, make sure that you consistently define high, medium, and low here, and define it in terms that make sense to people who aren't security risk analysts. Use distinctive colors to distinguish these. For example, green, yellow, and red are distinctive colors that may apply to high, medium, and low risks. You now have a risk analysis even upper management can understand. The book has some examples of how it works. Raw scores aren't particularly meaningful. Management wants to know priorities. What do we need to fix now? What can be delayed until later? Obviously something with a bright color red indicates this is something you have to fix now. A yellow may be fixed within a normal change cycle, and a green may be watch this to make sure it doesn't become worse, for example. That's one example of a high, medium, low definition. Risk rankings. We want to rank risks and compare the risk ratings. Are there risks that appear to be outliers? Be sure to investigate these. Make sure that if a system or an element has some sort of risk rating that looks to be far beyond or far less than its peers, that you understand exactly why this is going on and that it's not an artifact of our data gathering or analysis method. Compare the calculated rankings against the judgment of an experienced risk analyst. Compare one system's risk against another and use a domain expert, somebody who knows about the systems and knows how they operate, to assess whether the comparison makes sense. But what if nobody in your organization is an experienced risk analyst? That's an issue. You may be able to come up with this comparison. You may not be able to find somebody that can really review or compare one versus the other. Detailed system risk reviews. Dive into the details. There's more to risk analysis than number crunching or just comparing aggregate scores of one system to another and assigning things red, yellow, and green. Take the high-scoring systems, the one with the most risks, and develop a detailed picture of the risk. How did it get this score and what makes the system risky? Understand the environment in which that system operates to better understand the risk score. For a given system, drill down into the details. Make sure the assessment of overall risk makes sense and the conclusions of the details support this. The environment, when we talk about the environment in which a system operates, that includes the exposure. Where is the system exposed? What networks, internal, external, etc. What are the users of the system? What's the confidentiality of the data in the system? The criticality of the system, its impact if the system stopped working, and the existing controls. These all provide some sort of context for the risk score, and within these you may be able to determine exactly why the system was assigned a high risk value and justify that high risk value. Threat and vulnerability review. Once the risk rankings make sense, drill down into the threats and vulnerabilities behind them. See if the ratings and underlying data show common problems across different systems. You can see now we're sort of moving away from looking at the risk of individual elements, systems, application, and looking into overall organizational risks here. And we're using this detailed risk analysis to expand it a bit. This will indicate organization-wide issues not fixed by fixing a specific system. There's two approaches here that the book suggests. One is look at all the high-risk elements and compare them to each other and see what they have in common, or aggregate to see the entire risk analysis at a higher level, at a divisional, an organizational, a product level, whatever, to see if there are common problems like similar threats or vulnerabilities in systems in the aggregated group. Common vulnerabilities may indicate systematic problems that cover multiple systems. Activities to review organization-wide risks. Look at risks across the organization that aren't particular to a process or system. Look at the organizational control with respect to these threats, not just the controls on specific systems, but things that apply generally across the organization as a security control. And then look at the broader trends of the threats specific to your organization. There's research groups out there that will provide or usually sell security trend research. You can perform internal vulnerability and penetration tests to look at vulnerabilities within the organization and compare them organization-wide. Policy exceptions can tell you if you've got issues. If you see repeated policy exceptions in certain areas, this may indicate that a certain security policy isn't working or is being regularly bypassed in the interest of efficiency or management priorities. Audits and other third-party assessments, and documented security exceptions. We're dealing with a higher level of generalization. We're generalizing from the individual systems and feeding this into an organizational picture of risk with the idea that we're going to develop an organizational risk program that deals with this stuff organization-wide rather than just focusing on one specific application or one specific server technology or something. Security threat and trend assessments. Again, focusing on the organization as a whole. There's a lot of published information on global and sector securities threats, sector meaning the specific industry that your company's in. Vendors of various sorts that sell security services or perform security monitoring will aggregate reports based on what their clients report as well as other research and provide this. The best known come from IBM, Verizon, and Symantec, but there are others as well. The U.S. CERT is a good source of statistics on global and sector security threats. Regulatory bodies, ones that are relevant to your industry, may publish threat statistics that are useful and have a certain amount of credibility because it is a regulatory body here. Security news and forums. You can subscribe to these, you can view these online, review articles and so forth and get a sense of the trends in threats and vulnerabilities out there, though take these with a grain of salt because often this news is tied to a vendor product that will magically solve these problems. So, bear in mind that not all security news is really news. And then lastly, I want to specifically mention this is in the U.S. you have information sharing and analysis centers or ISACs for various industry sectors. The organization I'm in is a member of the Financial Services ISAC. This provides you a very secure web portal to view information about threats that have been reported, usually anonymously, to the ISAC itself, and the ISAC provides workshops and conferences where you can discuss with your peers in your industry what's actually going on and who is trying to attack us using what method and what the trends are there. You want to take this information, which is generic for industries, and apply it to your specific situation, organization-wide. You can also look at audit findings. Look at prior audit findings and other assessments. Here you're not looking at them to support or document the controls in specific systems or to look at possible vulnerabilities in specific systems. You're looking at them to see how good your organizational program is for securing your entire environment and if there are findings that are relevant that need to be addressed for the entire environment. Often audits will focus on financial controls and management governance issues, but these provide a context for security. My philosophy is for every technical security flaw you find, behind it is some sort of management dysfunction. If you're not managing security properly, you can't consistently address risks and threats. The general types of documents, if you've got a financial audit, they will perform general controls review that include controls over your information technology environment. If your company provides third-party service, if you're a hosting company, a service provider, whatever, the SSA E16 documents, the SOC 1 and SOC 2 as they're sometimes called, are documents that your company needs to generate to provide to its customers, to tell the customers what your controls are. And these are things that you can turn around and look and sometimes read between the lines, see what's included and what's not included. Because What's not included is sometimes stuff that you may have an issue with that was determined didn't need to be addressed in this particular forum. Review organizational security incident. Your organization is tracking internal security incidents, right? You have an incident management system. You're following ITIL. You've got a service desk that people call in and make requests and also report incidents to, and some of those incidents are security incidents. So your service desk should be able to categorize these, and you should be able to get reports from that system. Ensure your incident tracking system can reliably distinguish security incidents from other IT incidents. Most system down incidents are not security incidents. They tend to be caused by things other than a breach of your security policy. You do want, however, for it to be noted if a system down condition was caused by something like malware or denial of service attack by a security threat. Review incidents relevant to security, group based on common characteristics, and see what these characteristics are and their importance to your organization. Your incidents can include reports of spam or phishing email, antivirus activity, intrusion detection events, patch compliance or non-compliance, etc. Organizational security metrics. Apart from incidents, your organization should be tracking various metrics about the performance of information technology and aspects of the securing of that technology. What gets recorded and measured in terms of security and other things. There's an old saying, if you don't measure it, you can't manage it. So you want to look at things like network performance. This could be relevant to denial of service attacks as well as certain types of malware infestations. Access requests. Who is requesting access to what system? For what purpose? How many people are requesting this? You may want to track this. Some of this information is useful. Even trends in legitimate access requests, and I assume most are legit, can tell you something about stuff that's going on in your system that may reflect your security environment. Security incidents. We talked about these on the prior slide. Vulnerability and patch management. You should have a patch management program. It should go through change control. You should know when patches are applied and what the current patch levels are, and you should have network management or server management systems that go out, query the various devices and say, hi, what patch level are you at, and record this. You want to look at non-compliant patch levels. You want to look at the quickness with which you respond to implementing patches, and you want to make sure that the current recommended patch level is reasonable from a security perspective. Look at security exceptions against current standards. See if those pose a risk, and if there are trends there. If there are certain organizations, divisions or business units that are requesting a disproportionate amount of these, certain systems that require more, etc. And then look at event log summary from your intrusion detection system and your centrally managed antivirus, etc. So, you've got all these metrics, and now what we're looking at is the organization overall. We're stepping back in this particular chapter from doing a risk analysis of a tightly scoped system and thinking more about how our organization should approach this.